Hello, and welcome to Drift Off to History. Tonight, we invite you to close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let your mind drift across the sands of time. Together, we'll embark on a journey through the rise and fall of one of the most mesmerizing civilizations the world has ever known. Ancient Egypt, not a tale of wars and conquests, but a story woven from rivers and stars, from golden fields and sacred stones, from dreams that still whisper across desert winds. Settle into a comfortable position. Let the world around you fade. Allow the slow, timeless current of history to carry you gently into sleep. Our journey begins not in the bustling cities of pyramids and palaces, but in a wilder, older world. Long before kings and queens, before temples touched the heavens, before even the first stone was laid, we begin with the river, the Nile. Chapter 1. Dawn of the Nile. Breathe deeply. Imagine the world as it was tens of thousands of years ago. There are no cities. There are no roads. Only vast plains, great forests, and endless lakes, where today deserts stretch under a burning sun. The Nile winds its way northward, carving a green lifeline through a landscape of gold and stone. It is not yet the Egypt we know. The Sahara is alive, a land of grasses, of elephants and giraffes, of leopards lurking among the acacia trees, of great herds moving with the seasons. By the river's fertile banks, the first people arrive, not yet Egyptians, wanderers, hunters, families following the river's rhythm. They live lightly on the land, gathering fruits, fishing along the reeds, chasing antelope across the open plains. Nights are spent beneath open skies ablaze with stars. Campfires crackle gently against the hush of the wilderness. Stories are told, stories we will never hear, whispered in languages long since lost to time. For thousands of years, this life continues, a life woven with the river, tied to the gentle rise and fall of its waters. As centuries pass, the world begins to change. The rains grow fewer, the lakes shrink, the forests withdraw. The Sahara slowly becomes the desert we know today. But the Nile endures. Faithful, eternal, it continues to offer life to those who stay near its banks. It becomes more than just a river. It becomes the very heart of survival. The people adapt. They watch the seasons carefully. They move with the floods and the harvests. They build small shelters from reeds and clay. They learn to sow seeds in the rich black silt left behind after the river's flood. The first threads of a new life are woven, a life no longer of endless wandering, but of staying, of planting, of belonging. Here, in this ancient dance between water and sand, between earth and sun, the seeds of civilization are planted so gently, so quietly, that few would even notice. But in time, these small beginnings will blossom into greatness, into temples and tombs, gods and kings, stories and dreams. The river flows onward, and so too does the human spirit. Chapter 2. First villages and farmers, 6000 to 4000 BCE. The centuries pass, like the slow, endless drifting of the river itself. The world grows hotter, drier. The open savannas shrink back toward the horizon. The people who once followed herds and gathered wild fruits now cling more tightly to the ribbon of life, the Nile. Along its banks, a quiet revolution begins. The first farmers emerge, not by sudden invention, but through small, patient steps. They scatter seeds in the moist, rich soil left by the river's floods. They notice which plants grow strong. They save the best grains for the next season. Little by little, the wild grasses of the Nile Valley become fields of barley and wheat. Food becomes more plentiful. Families grow larger. Life no longer means endless wandering. It means staying, building, belonging. By around 6000 BCE, the first true villages take shape along the river's banks. Clusters of simple houses made from mud and reeds, each home sheltering generations of family. Imagine a morning in one of these early settlements, the soft braying of domesticated cattle, the cluck of early chickens scratching in the dirt, children playing by the water's edge, fishermen pulling in heavy nets shimmering with silver fish. Life is not easy, but it is stable, predictable. For the first time, people live tied not just to the land, but to each other. Villages become communities. Communities become small kingdoms. The Nile teaches them. It floods predictably each year, swelling with water from rains far to the south. It leaves behind a black blanket of silt. Soil so rich it seems to hum with life. The ancient Egyptians would one day call their land Kemet, the Black Land, named for this sacred soil. The Nile also teaches them something deeper, the cycles of life, birth, growth, death, rebirth. Just as the river rises and falls, so too does life flow in endless patterns. And so they plant, they harvest, they build stronger homes, they craft pottery to store grain and beer, they make boats from bundles of papyrus to fish and travel the waters. Art begins to blossom, clay figures shaped by gentle hands, beads strung from shells and stones, symbols painted onto pots, perhaps the earliest hints of writing yet to come. By 5000 BCE, these early farmers have spread across much of the Nile Valley. Their villages cluster close to the river's winding path, small lights of life shining against the growing desert. And something remarkable happens. Trade begins. Shells from the Red Sea, obsidian from Ethiopia, turquoise from the Sinai, all find their way into these early communities. Gifts carried by boats, traded by travelers, linking distant lands. The Nile is no longer just a source of food, it is a highway of dreams. The seeds of Egypt's greatness are growing, not in conquest, but in quiet patience, in harvests, in stories told by firelight, in boats gliding over moonlit waters. The first true civilization is beginning to stir, and the river, faithful and eternal, whispers onward toward tomorrow. Chapter 3. The First Kingdoms of Egypt, Nakada Culture, 4000 to 3100 BCE. The centuries unfold softly, one after another, like waves lapping against the river's shore. The small farming villages along the Nile grow larger. New skills are learned, passed down from elder to child. Pottery becomes more refined, painted with delicate images of animals, boats, and dancing figures. Tools of stone give way to tools of copper, gleaming in the sunlight, sharp and strong. Society grows more complex. Homes of simple reed and mud bricks expand into clusters, then into towns. Each village governed by a chieftain, a figure of wisdom, strength, or perhaps simply good fortune. Around 4000 BCE, a profound transformation begins. The people of the Nile no longer live merely in scattered settlements. Power begins to gather, influence spreads. Small communities join together, drawn by trade, protection, and shared faith in the river's blessings. From this union, two distinct regions rise: Upper Egypt, the narrow strip along the southern Nile; Lower Egypt, the wide, fertile delta to the north. Each with its own culture, traditions, and symbols, each with its own proud leaders. In Upper Egypt, around the town of Nakada, a new and vibrant culture flourishes. Historians today call it the Nakada culture, the seedbed of Egyptian civilization. Imagine their world: bright white linen garments fluttering in the breeze, jewelry made of gold, turquoise, and lapis lazuli. Homes clustered along dusty paths lined with acacia trees. Artists craft delicate pots painted with scenes of boats, hippos, and hunters. Priests whisper prayers to early gods. Spirits of the river, the sun, the sky, and rulers begin to emerge, not just village leaders, but kings. These first kings of Nakada leave behind traces of their growing ambition. Ceremonial maces carved with scenes of triumph. Tombs built larger and finer than any before. Early hieroglyphs scratched into ivory and stone. Their power is not just over land, but over belief. For the first time, a new idea blooms, that a ruler is not merely a man or woman, but a bridge between earth and heaven, a living embodiment of divine will. Meanwhile, in the delta to the north, Lower Egypt flourishes in its own way. The wide marshy lands are rich in reeds, papyrus, and fish. Their people are skilled boat builders, traders, and weavers. Their settlements teem with activity, craftsmen shaping delicate artifacts, farmers tending to lush, flooded fields. For centuries, Upper and Lower Egypt grow in parallel, separate yet linked by the eternal river. They trade, they compete, they watch each other with wary eyes. Slowly, rivalry sharpens, ambitions stir. Leaders of Upper Egypt, drawn by dreams of unity or conquest, look to the north. The idea of one Egypt, one land, one people, one divine king, begins to form. It is not yet realized, but it draws closer year by year. The Nile watches silently, its waters carrying whispers of a destiny not yet fulfilled. Chapter 4. The Unification. Narmer and the Two Lands, circa 3100 BCE. The river flows as it always has, but the people along its banks are changing. Their dreams are growing larger. By around 3200 BCE, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt stand apart like two proud siblings. Each wears its own crown, the white crown of the south, tall, elegant, pointed like a flame. The red crown of the north, broad and curved like the curling horns of a ram. Each has its own gods, its own traditions, its own way of life. Yet the river connects them, and rivalry stirs beneath the surface. In the south, among the fertile fields and rocky cliffs of Upper Egypt, a powerful king rises. His name is Narmer, a figure half shrouded in legend, half rooted in the firm soil of history. Imagine Narmer, tall and commanding, his skin bronzed by the relentless Egyptian sun, his robes adorned with symbols of power. In his hands, he carries not only a mace and a scepter, but a vision, the vision of one Egypt. We know of Narmer today thanks to a remarkable artifact, the Narmer palette, a slab of dark green stone carved with delicate swirling images. On one side, Narmer wears the white crown of Upper Egypt, on the other, the red crown of Lower Egypt. Victory is written into its carvings, Narmer smiting enemies, Narmer leading processions, Narmer towering over the defeated, watched by falcon gods. It tells a story older than any book, a story of conquest, yes, but also of unification, of two lands becoming one. Whether by war or diplomacy, or perhaps both, Narmer succeeds where generations before him had only dreamed. He brings together Upper and Lower Egypt under a single crown. A new symbol is born, the double crown, combining red and white, symbolizing unity between the two lands. And so, sometime around 3100 BCE, history truly begins in Egypt. The first pharaoh stands astride the Nile, a living god, ruling over a land stretching from the delta marshes in the north to the rocky reaches of the south. Imagine the first grand ceremony, Narmer standing on a stone platform, priests chanting hymns in the rising sun, the scent of incense curling into the brightening sky. The people watch in awe as he dons the double crown, becoming Pharaoh, the living Horus, the son of the falcon god. With this moment, the cycle of kings and dynasties begins. From Narmer's seed, Egypt's story will grow, pyramids will rise, temples will be carved from cliffs, empires will expand and crumble, but always at its heart will be the memory of this first unification. Narmer's name will echo down through the corridors of time, whispered on the winds that sweep across the great desert sands. The two lands are one. Egypt is born, and the river flows forward, carrying the dreams of a nation newly awakened. Chapter 5. The Old Kingdom. Builders of Eternity. Circa 2700 മുതൽ 2200 ക്രിസ്തു മുന്നർ. Soft and steady as the Nile itself. From Narmer's unification, the seeds of a true civilization take root. By around 2700 BCE, Egypt enters what later historians will call the Old Kingdom, the first great age, the first golden dawn. This is the time of the pyramid builders, an age when pharaohs are not simply kings, but living gods, their will extending across the two lands like the rays of the sun. Imagine the world then, a land bathed in light, the river splitting the desert into two green ribbons. Villages bustle with farmers, potters, and scribes. Grand processions move along avenues of palm trees. The scent of sweet myrrh and lotus fills the warm air. At the heart of it all stands the pharaoh, an unchallengeable force, a bridge between mortal life and the divine. The pharaoh does not rule for himself alone. He rules for Ma'at Dash, the sacred balance of order, justice, and harmony in the universe. One of the first great builders is Djoser, who reigns around 2670 BCE. Guided by his brilliant architect and high priest, Imhotep, he dreams of a monument more lasting than any before. Not a low mound of mud brick, but something new, something eternal. The result is the step pyramid at Saqqara, the world's first large-scale stone monument. Imagine standing before it, a stairway to the heavens, rising tier upon tier against the brilliant desert sky. Massive limestone blocks, chiseled with care, stacked in precise geometric perfection. Workers sing as they quarry and haul the stones. Priests chant prayers to the sun, god Ra. The step pyramid shines pale gold in the sunlight, a beacon of hope for eternity. Djoser's pyramid is not a tomb. It is a promise that the pharaoh will live forever, his soul ascending with the rising sun each morning. Inspired by this vision, later pharaohs reach even higher. Around 2600 BCE, under kings like Sneferu, new pyramids are built. Smooth-sided, shining monuments that touch the sky. Sneferu's architects experiment. The bent pyramid, its angle shifting midway, a beautiful mistake. The red pyramid, Egypt's first true, smooth-sided masterpiece. Then comes the greatest of all, at Giza, under the reign of Khufu, known to the Greeks as Cheops. The Great Pyramid rises. Picture it, over 2 million limestone blocks, each weighing as much as a small car, set so precisely that even today, no blade of a knife can fit between some stones. The Great Pyramid soars nearly 150 meters into the air. For nearly 4,000 years, it will remain the tallest structure ever built by human hands. Beside it stand the pyramids of Khafra and Menkaure, and the eternal guardian of the plateau, the Great Sphinx. A lion's body, a king's face, gazing silently across the desert sands. But the Old Kingdom is not just stone and splendor. It is the age of brilliant craftsmen, artisans carving delicate alabaster vessels, scribes recording prayers and laws on fresh papyrus scrolls, priests tending to the grand temples where gods and men commune. Society is well ordered. Each person has a place. Farmers till the fields and give part of their harvest to feed temple workers and laborers. In return, they are protected by the Pharaoh's mighty hand, his armies, his laws, his connection to the divine. It is an age of stability, wealth, and grand dreams. The Nile floods predictably. The gods are honored. Life follows an eternal, comforting rhythm. And yet, even golden ages are not immune to change. As centuries pass, the cost of the great projects grows heavy. Local nobles grow in power, managing their regions with increasing independence. The river's floods, once so reliable, begin to falter. By around 2200 BCE, the Old Kingdom begins to waver. Whispers of unrest stir along the Nile. The centralized power of the pharaoh weakens. Egypt begins to fracture. But even as political unity fades, the monuments of this age endure. The pyramids stand. The temples hold their mysteries. The ideals of Ma'at, order, balance, harmony, remain etched into the heart of Egypt. The great age may dim for a time, but the soul of Egypt shines on, awaiting its next rebirth beneath the eternal stars. Chapter 6. The First Intermediate Period. Chaos and Survival. Circa 2200 മുതൽ 250 ക്രിസ്തുപിറപ്പ് മുன்னர். Even the strongest river can be choked by sand. Even the brightest star can be hidden by cloud. As the Old Kingdom fades, Egypt enters its first great trial. Historians call this time the First Intermediate Period, but to the people living it, it must have felt like the slow unraveling of the world they had always known. Around 2200 BCE, the ancient rhythms falter. The Nile's floods become unpredictable, sometimes failing entirely, leaving fields cracked and barren under a pitiless sun. With poor harvests comes hunger. With hunger comes unrest. The great centralized government that once built pyramids now struggles to feed its people. Pharaohs, once distant and divine, lose their sacred aura. Nobles and governors, the nomarchs, rise in power across the provinces. Egypt splinters. Imagine a land without a single ruler, towns and villages turning inward, guarding their own harvests, trusting no voice but their own. Small kings emerge, ruling from crumbling palaces. Lords of Upper Egypt clash with lords of Lower Egypt. The once united two lands are torn into many. And yet, life goes on. Even in hardship, the Egyptians endure. In small towns along the Nile, farmers continue to sow seeds and harvest what they can. Artisans continue to shape pottery and weave linen. Priests continue to whisper prayers to Ra, Osiris, and Isis, hoping to call the Nile back to life. In this time of darkness, a new voice rises, the voice of the common people. Texts from this period, like the admonitions of Ipuwer, lament the chaos. The river is dry, its banks cracked with hunger. The beggar owns treasure, and the noble goes hungry. Yet even in these laments there is hope, a belief that balance, Ma'at, can someday be restored. In the southern city of Thebes, a powerful family emerges, not grand kings commanding armies of thousands, not builders of pyramids, but practical, determined leaders, rulers who understand that Egypt must be stitched back together, one village, one harvest, one prayer at a time. Chief among them is a man named Mentuhotep, a king of Thebes, patient, resilient. By around 2050 BCE, after generations of division, Mentuhotep II rises to bring unity once again. He marches northward, battling rival kings. But more importantly, he offers something even greater than power: hope, the dream of a renewed Egypt. When at last he claims the crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt, the two lands are made whole once more. A second unification, a second sunrise. Thus ends the first intermediate period. And so begins a new golden age, the Middle Kingdom. The people rebuild. They sow their fields. They sing hymns to the gods. They remember the suffering, but turn their faces once again to the rising sun. The river flows steady once more, and the dreams of Egypt are reborn. Chapter 7, The Middle Kingdom, the Age of Rebirth, circa 2050 to 1800 BCE. The sun rises once more over Egypt, brighter, wiser, tempered by hardship, but filled with quiet strength. This is the Middle Kingdom, an age of rebirth and golden renewal. It begins around 2050 BCE, under the reign of Mentuhotep II of Thebes, who unifies the two lands and restores the sacred balance of Ma'at. Imagine Egypt during this time, the fields along the Nile rich and green once more, heavy with wheat and barley, the marketplaces bustling with the chatter of traders, farmers and potters. Boats laden with papyrus, wine, and gold drift slowly along the river's gentle current. The pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom are no longer distant gods upon high thrones. They are seen as shepherd kings, caretakers of their people, guardians of stability, protectors of justice. Pharaohs like Amenemhat I and Senusret III worked tirelessly to strengthen Egypt's borders, to rebuild its temples, and to ensure that no famine or drought can ever again bring the land to its knees. Fortresses rise along the southern frontier at the borders of Nubia, strong and watchful. Expeditions sail down the Nile and across the deserts, seeking gold, incense, and rare gems. Trade flourishes with lands beyond the Red Sea and the Levant. Egypt's wealth grows. In these prosperous times, art and literature blossom. The Middle Kingdom becomes a time not of grand monuments alone, but of poetry, wisdom, texts, and storytelling. Imagine sitting in a shaded courtyard, a scribe unrolling a fresh scroll of papyrus, his reed pen flowing across the fibers in neat black ink. He writes tales of adventure, of shipwrecked sailors encountering magical islands, of wise peasants outwitting corrupt judges, of kings pondering the meaning of justice and mortality. The famous tale of Sinuhe is born in this time, the story of a court official who flees Egypt, wanders the deserts, lives among foreign tribes, and longs with all his heart to return to the sweet soil of his homeland. Art, too, changes during this age. Statues and reliefs show pharaohs not as perfect, distant gods, but as strong, aging humans, wrinkled, wise, filled with the burdens of leadership. There is a new humility in the air, a new sense of empathy. Temples are rebuilt, larger and more beautiful than before. The great temple of Karnak in Thebes begins its long, glorious life. Obelisks rise like needles of stone, catching the first rays of sunrise in brilliant flashes of gold. In the countryside, life for ordinary Egyptians improves. Irrigation channels are restored. Harvests are plentiful. Families thrive under the steady, protective hand of their pharaohs. The kings of the Middle Kingdom understand. They rule not through terror, but through trust. They are stewards of the land, chosen by the gods not to enrich themselves, but to care for the people. And for nearly 3 centuries they succeed. Egypt enjoys a second golden age, an age of peace, prosperity, and quiet pride. But history moves ever forward. No age, however bright, lasts forever. By around 1800 BCE, the power of the Middle Kingdom pharaohs begins to wane. Foreign powers from the east, known later as the Hyksos, begin to stir beyond the delta. Internal divisions grow. The light of the Middle Kingdom begins to flicker. Yet its memory will endure, the wisdom written down, the art and poetry carved into tomb walls. The ideals of justice and stewardship will ripple forward through all the ages of Egypt still to come. And so, as the Nile continues its ancient flow, Egypt prepares to face its next great challenge. Chapter 8. The Second Intermediate Period. Strangers in the Land. 1800, 1550 BCE. As the Middle Kingdom fades around 1800 BCE, Egypt enters a new and unfamiliar age. Historians call it the Second Intermediate Period. Once again, unity dissolves. Pharaohs lose their strength. Regional rulers, once loyal governors, now carve out small kingdoms of their own. And from the northeast, from beyond the Sinai Desert, new people arrive, the Hyksos. Not invaders in a single great wave, not armies of conquest, but traders first, settlers, families seeking opportunity in the fertile fields of the delta. They bring new ideas, new tools, new animals, horses never before seen in Egypt, and a new weapon, the horse-drawn chariot. At first, they blend in, trading, farming, living among the Egyptians. But slowly, surely, they rise, gaining wealth, gaining influence, and in time, seizing cities for themselves. By around 1650 BCE, the Hyksos rule the northern part of Egypt from their capital at Avaris. Their kings adopt Egyptian titles. They pray to Egyptian gods alongside their own. They wear Egyptian symbols of kingship, the crook and flail, the double crown of the two lands. But to many Egyptians they remain strangers, outsiders. In the south, the city of Thebes remains free, a proud Egyptian stronghold. Its rulers, mere local lords for now, bide their time. They watch, they wait. And across the two lands, ordinary life continues. Farmers sow and harvest. Priests chant morning hymns to the gods. Mothers tell stories to their children by firelight. The Hyksos introduce new technologies, stronger bows, faster chariots, bronze weapons that gleam under the sun. Egypt absorbs these lessons, even as it resents the teachers. It is a strange time, a land half ruled by foreign kings, half clinging to its ancient traditions. But Egypt's spirit does not break. It bends like the reed, but does not snap. In Thebes, a series of powerful local rulers begins to stir. The Sekenenre family. They dream of driving the Hyksos from Egyptian soil. And when a Hyksos king, Apepi, sends absurd demands, such as ordering the noisy hippos at Thebes to be silenced, the insult is too much to bear. Tensions rise. Sekenenre, Tau, brave and determined, wages war. He dies in battle, wounds later found on his mummy, but his sons take up the cause. Kamosa, his heir, strikes against the Hyksos, winning victories along the Nile. And finally, it is his brother, the young, fierce Amosei Fen, who completes the dream. Around 1550 BCE, after years of struggle, Ahmose captures Avaris. The Hyksos are driven out. Egypt is free once more. The Theban kings, hardened by years of conflict, are stronger than any pharaohs before, and they are ready, not merely to rebuild, but to build something grander than ever before. Thus, with the dawn rising over a liberated Nile, Egypt steps into its greatest era yet, the glorious, unstoppable New Kingdom. Chapter 9. The New Kingdom. Egypt's golden empire circa 1550 to 1070 BCE. A new sun rises over Egypt, brighter, bolder, radiating across deserts and seas alike. This is the new kingdom, Egypt's golden empire, a time of wealth, exploration, and towering greatness. It begins with Ahmose I, the liberator. In 1550 BCE, he drives the Hyksos from Egypt and restores the two lands under Theban rule. He rebuilds temples. He fortifies Egypt's borders. He sets the stage for a golden age. Imagine the Nile shimmering in the midday sun. Royal barges glide across its waters, their sails billowing like lotus petals. Cities buzz with life. Temples gleam with fresh white limestone. Scribes, artisans, priests, all thrive in the renewed peace. Egypt stretches her fingers outward, reaching beyond her traditional borders. South into Nubia, rich with gold and ebony. Northeast into Canaan and Syria, where trade routes glitter with exotic treasures. The pharaohs of the new kingdom are mighty, not distant gods, but warriors and builders, visionaries and explorers. Each one adds a new thread to Egypt's growing tapestry of greatness. Thutmose. I pushes Egypt's borders farther than ever before. Thutmose III, known later as the Napoleon of Egypt, leads armies across Asia, winning battle after battle, bringing home treasures and tribute that make Egypt the wealthiest land on earth. And standing among these mighty kings is a woman, one of Egypt's greatest, Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut, daughter of Thutmose I, steps beyond the traditional role of queen. She dons the ceremonial beard of the pharaoh. She orders great temples built, most famously her breathtaking mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri, carved into the cliffs at Thebes. Under her reign, Egypt knows peace and prosperity. Trade flourishes. Ships return from distant lands like Punt, bearing incense, ivory, and exotic animals. Imagine a grand fleet returning to Thebes, ships heavy with treasures, the riverbanks crowded with cheering citizens, the air filled with music and the scent of burning myrrh. After Hatshepsut's death, her name is nearly erased by successors, but the stones remember, and history remembers. Later comes Amenhotep III, who builds Egypt's grandest temples and celebrates 3 royal jubilees, living symbols of his power and divine favor. His reign is a time of opulence, colossal statues towering over temple courts, jewels sparkling in the sun, diplomats from Babylon and Mitanni sending gifts across deserts and mountains. But then a curious figure rises, Akhenaten. Akhenaten, once Amenhotep IV, challenges Egypt's ancient faith. He declares that there is only one true god, the sun disk, Aten. He builds a new capital, Akhetaten, in the desert, far from the traditional temples. His reign is peaceful, yet strange. Art changes. Figures are shown more naturally, even tenderly. Pharaohs are no longer perfect symbols of might, but human beings, frail, loving, complex. After Akhenaten's death, Egypt returns to the old ways. The boy king Tutankhamun, barely 9 years old, restores the worship of Amun. Though Tutankhamun dies young, his tomb remains hidden for centuries, undisturbed by robbers. In 1922, when archaeologist Howard Carter uncovers Tutankhamun's burial chamber, the world is stunned. Golden death mask, jeweled sandals, chariots, games, and perfumes preserved in the desert darkness. A window into a vanished world. But Tutankhamun's death is not the end. Egypt's greatness surges once more under Ramses II, known to later generations as Ramses the Great. Ramses rules for more than 60 years, a lifetime of glory. He builds cities, temples, and colossal statues. He signs the world's first known peace treaty with the Hittites after the Battle of Kadesh. Imagine standing before the great temples of Abu Simbel, 4 colossal seated figures of Ramses, carved into living rock, their gaze calm and eternal, watching over the Nile for all time. Egypt reaches the height of its power. From the mountains of Nubia to the shores of the Mediterranean, Egypt is the shining jewel of the ancient world. But all golden ages fade. Ramses' successors are not as strong. Foreign pressures mount. Internal struggles sap strength. By around 1070 BCE, the new kingdom slowly collapses. The world grows more complicated, more dangerous. Egypt, though still proud and wise, begins to slip into shadows once again. But the memories endure, the colossal statues, the glittering tombs, the whispered prayers drifting through silent temples. And above all, the dream of Egypt, bright, golden, and eternal, continues to echo across time. Chapter 10, the Third Intermediate Period, A Kingdom Divided, 1070-664 BCE. The golden light of the new kingdom fades. The mighty pharaohs are gone. The temples still rise towards the heavens. The river still winds toward the sea. But Egypt, once a shining jewel, is now dimmer. We enter the Third Intermediate Period, a time of division, uncertainty, and quiet resilience. After the death of Ramses the Pen around 1070 BCE, the old unity unravels. The two lands fracture once more. In the north, a line of kings known as the 21st Dynasty rules from Tanis, a city near the delta. In the south, at Thebes, the high priests of Amun wield true power. Egypt is no longer one kingdom, but two souls, separated yet beating together. Still, life continues. Priests chant their hymns to Amun. Farmers tend their fields along the riverbanks. Children learn their letters under the shade of sycamore trees. But the world beyond Egypt is changing. New peoples rise along the Mediterranean. The Phoenicians, the Aramaeans, the growing cities of Canaan. Foreign influences begin to trickle in. New languages, new gods, new ambitions. In Egypt, different families vie for control. Libyan chiefs, once hired as mercenaries, settle in the delta. They marry into Egyptian nobility. They found new dynasties, the 22nd and 23rd dynasties. Kings like Shoshenq-Pun, later remembered as Shishak in the Bible, rule a patchwork land. But no pharaoh commands all of Egypt now. The delta lords rule the north, the priests rule the south, and in the Nubian southlands, yet another kingdom grows strong. The kingdom of Kush. In Thebes, the temple of Karnak expands. Massive columns rise like stone forests. Obelisks pierce the sky. Priests carve prayers into every wall, seeking to preserve Mayat, the sacred balance of the universe, even as the world frays. Burials change too. Instead of great pyramids or hidden tombs in the Valley of the Kings, the nobles of this age are buried in simple stone sarcophagi, hidden within modest tombs. They cling to the old rituals, but resources are scarcer. Faith remains. Splendor fades. And yet, even in this dimmer time, brilliance flickers. The Egyptian people remain proud, ingenious, deeply spiritual. They adapt, they endure. In the 8th century BCE, across the deserts to the south, the Nubian kings of Kush, black-skinned and proud, see Egypt's weakness. They are not foreigners to Egyptian culture. For centuries, the Nubians have worshipped Egyptian gods. They have built pyramids of their own along the Nile's southern curve. They believe they are the true inheritors of the Egyptian spirit. One powerful king, Poifahai, marches north. He conquers Thebes peacefully. Respected as a pious leader, he prays at Karnak. He honors Amun. He declares himself Pharaoh of all Egypt. Thus, the 25th dynasty is born, the dynasty of the Black Pharaohs. Rulers like Pie, Shabaka, and Taharka strive to reunite Egypt under a single crown. They bring new energy, new vision. Temples are restored. Monuments rise again. Egypt breathes anew, for a time, but storms gather on the horizon. Far to the east, a new power rises, Assyria, the mightiest empire the world has yet seen. Their armies march like thunder. City after city falls before them, and soon Egypt, ancient and weary, will feel the force of this new tempest. The third intermediate period ends not with triumph, but with challenge. Yet Egypt does not vanish. Her spirit, molded by millennia of resilience, remains unbroken, ready to endure the trials to come. The river flows still. The temples still whisper their prayers. The story continues. Chapter 11. The Late Period. Egypt's Last Glory. 664–332 BCE. The Nile drifts onward, and Egypt, scarred but not broken, enters her final era of native rule, the Late Period. It is the year 664 BCE. The Assyrians, though fierce, have withdrawn from Egypt. In their place rises a new pharaoh, Ptolemaic. He is the founder of the 26th dynasty, known as the Ptolemaic Dynasty, after the city of Sais in the Delta. Ptolemaic is a visionary. He reunites Egypt, north and south. He invites Greek mercenaries to settle at Naucratis, establishing Egypt's first true Greek trading port. Trade flourishes. Culture revives. Egypt stirs with new life. Imagine the streets of Sais, bustling markets filled with spices and papyrus, foreign merchants haggling beside Egyptian artisans, priests in white linen moving through crowds with serene purpose. The art of the Saite period is a deliberate echo of the Old Kingdom. Statues are carved once again with idealized, timeless grace. Temples rise in grand, harmonious lines. The ancient ways are honored, yet tinged now with foreign influences, a blending of traditions. Egyptian scribes, once again, paint delicate hieroglyphs along temple walls. Tales of Horus and Isis, Osiris and Ra, continue to dance across polished limestone. The old gods live still, yet the world presses closer. The Eastern Mediterranean is no longer a distant neighbor, but a web of rising powers. In 525 BCE, a new conqueror arrives, Cambyses II, king of Persia. At the Battle of Pelusium, the Egyptians fall. Cambyses crowns himself pharaoh. Egypt, proud and ancient, becomes part of the vast Persian Empire. But Egypt's spirit is not so easily subdued. Rebellions flare up across the centuries. New pharaohs arise, sometimes from Egypt, sometimes from foreign lands, all trying to rekindle the old glory. In 404 BCE, after nearly 120 years of Persian rule, Egypt wins brief independence under Pharaoh Amyrtaeus. The 28th, 29th, and 30th dynasties follow, a flurry of native kings striving to preserve the land's ancient soul. Picture the temple at Philae in these years, priests chanting ancient hymns at dawn, lotus blossoms drifting across quiet waters, the stone walls alive with flickering torchlight. Even in the twilight, Egypt's devotion to her gods never wavers. New temples are built at Dendera, Edfu, and Kom Ombo. The old architectural traditions endure, even flourish. But history's tide is relentless. In 343 BCE, the Persians return under Artaxerxes III. Egypt once again falls into foreign hands. Not long after, a new force rises in the west, a young Macedonian king with dreams as vast as the deserts and seas combined. His name is Alexander the Great. In 332 BCE, Alexander marches into Egypt, but there is no need for battle. The Egyptians, weary of Persian rule, welcome him as a liberator. At Memphis, Alexander is crowned pharaoh. He visits the oracle of Amun at Siwa Oasis, where he is declared the son of Amun, a god-king in the Egyptian tradition. And thus, After 3,000 years of native rule, Egypt's destiny becomes intertwined with the world beyond her deserts. The late period ends not with collapse, but with transformation. Egypt remains herself, proud, ancient, resilient. But now she stands at the crossroads of the Greek, Persian, and eventually Roman worlds. Her temples will echo with foreign tongues. Her gods will share their altars with new deities. Her river will carry different banners on its currents. Yet beneath it all, the old heartbeat of Egypt endures, steady as ever, whispering through time. Chapter 12. The Ptolemaic Dynasty. Hyksos on the Nile, 332 of 30 BCE. The year is 332 BCE. A warm wind stirs the sands. The Nile gleams beneath a pale sun. And Egypt, ancient and wise, welcomes a new ruler from distant lands. Alexander the Great, son of Philip of Macedon, has come, not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. In Memphis, Alexander dons the double crown of Egypt, the red of the north, the white of the south. He is declared Pharaoh, son of Amun, protector of Ma'at. But Alexander's gaze stretches beyond Egypt. His dream lies to the east, in Persia and India. Before leaving, he gives Egypt a vision, a city, a new city. At the edge of the Mediterranean, on a curve of sandy coastline, he lays the foundation stones of Alexandria, a city of marble and light, a city where Egyptian wisdom and Greek ambition would meet. Alexander departs, never to return. In 323 BCE, he dies in Babylon, only 32 years old. His empire shatters like a pot dropped on stone. His generals, the Diadochi, divide the pieces, and Egypt falls into the hands of one man, Ptolemy, son of Lagus, a trusted friend of Alexander. Ptolemy makes Egypt his own. He founds the Ptolemaic Dynasty, a line of Greek pharaohs that will rule for nearly 300 years. Ptolemy Sota, the savior, governs wisely. He honors the old traditions. He builds temples in the names of the ancient gods. He places Greek statues beside Egyptian obelisks. He rules not by destroying the past, but by weaving it into something new. And Alexandria, Alexander's dream, becomes a living marvel. Its wide boulevards are lined with marble colonnades. Its harbours bristle with ships from every corner of the known world. At the water's edge rises the towering lighthouse of Pharaohs, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Its beacon of flame and polished bronze mirrors shines for sailors miles out at sea. In the heart of the city stands the great library of Alexandria, a temple of learning. Scholars from Greece, Egypt, India, and beyond gather here. They translate, they debate, they dream. It is said the library held over 400,000 scrolls, the wisdom of centuries bound in fragile papyrus. The Ptolemies reign over a thriving kingdom. But beneath the marble and gold, tensions flicker. The Greeks rule, the Egyptians endure, 2 cultures, side by side, never fully one. The Ptolemies, too, are often at war, brother against brother, sister against sister. Intrigue coils through the palace like a hidden asp. And yet, in these centuries, some of the most extraordinary figures emerge. Ptolemy II Philadelphus, a patron of arts and sciences. Ptolemy III Euergetes, who expands Egypt's reach into Syria. Cleopatra II and Cleopatra III, queens who hold power in their own right. Egypt remains a beacon of culture and learning. Greek philosophers walk the shaded halls of Alexandria's libraries. Egyptian priests chant in the great temples of Karnak and Philae. Merchants cross deserts and sail the Nile with goods and gossip. Life hums on. But as centuries pass, the world beyond grows restless. In Italy, a new power rises, Rome. The Romans, pragmatic and ambitious, set their sights on the wealth of Egypt. They watch, they wait. They scheme. In the 1st century BCE, the Ptolemaic Dynasty, once mighty, has weakened. Pharaohs come and go, often mere pawns in Roman games. Egypt teeters between independence and becoming another Roman province. And then, at the dusk of this long dynasty, a final brilliant flame appears. A young queen, fluent in many tongues, clever, charismatic, determined to save her kingdom. Her name is Cleopatra, the last pharaoh, the last hope of ancient Egypt. The story of Cleopatra will be one of ambition, love, and tragedy. It will echo down the corridors of history long after the temples fall silent. But for now, Egypt still shines under the Mediterranean sun. The river still winds its way north, the old gods still listen, and Alexandria's white walls still catch the first light of dawn. Chapter 13. Cleopatra, Egypt's last queen, 69 to 30 BCE. The year is 69 BCE. In a grand palace along the glittering shores of Alexandria, a child is born beneath the warm Egyptian sun. Her name, Cleopatra VII Philopator. She is the daughter of Pharaoh Ptolemy the Pui, or Letes, and though she is born into wealth and power, the sands of Egypt whisper of coming storms. From the beginning, Cleopatra stands apart. She is not simply beautiful, as the legends would later claim. She is brilliant, curious, willed by the gods, or perhaps by her own heart, to be more. As a young girl, Cleopatra is educated in the great traditions of both Egypt and Greece. She learns philosophy, mathematics, rhetoric. She studies the histories of her land, from the myths of Osiris to the conquests of Alexander. She speaks many languages, not just Greek, like most of her royal family, but Egyptian, Hebrew, Aramaic, and others. It is said she could speak to any ambassador in their native tongue, an almost magical gift in an age when language was often a wall between rulers and the ruled. Picture her, a girl of 12, walking the colonnades of the Alexandrian palace, the salty breeze from the harbour tangling her dark hair, scrolls clutched to her chest, her mind alight with dreams not just of power, but of understanding. The Nile, ever flowing, carries her into young womanhood. In 51 BCE, Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy the Pui, dies. By his will, Cleopatra and her younger brother Ptolemy III are to rule together, but the boy king is too young to rule without influence, and the court, a nest of schemers and opportunists, turns against Cleopatra. At just 18 years old, Cleopatra is forced into exile, banished from Alexandria. Imagine her now, crossing the desert under a burning sun, her face veiled against the wind, her heart heavy but unbroken. She retreats to Syria, but she doesn't despair. Instead, she plans, patiently, cleverly, waiting for her moment to reclaim her throne. That moment comes in 48 BCE. Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, arrives in Egypt. He comes not for Cleopatra, but to settle a dispute between her and her brother. Yet Cleopatra sees the opportunity. In the dead of night, she has herself smuggled into the royal palace. Some say she hides inside a sack of linen, others a rolled carpet. Imagine the scene, torches flickering against stone walls, footsteps echoing through the silent halls, a heavy bundle unrolled at Caesar's feet, and from it steps Cleopatra, radiant, poised, unafraid. She speaks to Caesar not as a supplicant, but as an equal. She offers not just beauty, but intelligence, charm, vision. Caesar, battle-hardened and shrewd, is enchanted. He agrees to support Cleopatra's claim to the throne. A civil war erupts. Cleopatra's brother, Ptolemy III, rallies forces against her. Fierce battles rage in Alexandria. The great library burns, a tragedy whispered of through the ages. But in the end, Cleopatra triumphs. Her brother drowns in the Nile while fleeing battle. Cleopatra ascends the throne once more, this time with her younger brother Ptolemy XV as a figurehead beside her. Shortly after, Cleopatra and Caesar become lovers. In 47 BCE, she bears him a son, Caesarion, Little Caesar. Her hopes for Egypt, and perhaps for a place alongside Rome itself, burn bright. In 46 BCE, Cleopatra travels to Rome. She dazzles the city. Romans, wary yet fascinated, marvel at her presence. Her golden barge sails up the Tiber. Her perfumes drift through marble corridors. But dreams die swiftly in the streets of power. In 44 BCE, Julius Caesar is assassinated on the Ides of March. The world shifts again. Cleopatra flees back to Egypt, her son in tow. There she reigns alone, shrewd and unbowed, even as chaos consumes Rome. From the wreckage of civil war emerges a new figure, Mark Antony, a soldier, a statesman, a man of ambition and appetite. In 41 BCE, Antony summons Cleopatra. He needs her wealth to fund his campaigns. She answers with theatrical brilliance. Picture her royal barge sailing up the Cydnus River, sails dyed purple, oars of silver, the air thick with the scent of incense. Cleopatra reclines beneath a golden canopy, dressed as Isis herself, surrounded by attendants playing soft music. Antony is utterly captivated. Their meeting kindles a partnership, political and romantic, that will shake the world. Together, they share feasts and festivals. They dream of empires spanning east and west. Cleopatra bears Antony 3 children, Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus. But Rome does not forget, nor forgive. Octavian, Julius Caesar's adopted son, turns public opinion against Cleopatra. He paints her as a sorceress, a foreign queen who has bewitched Antony. War is declared. The final act begins. In 31 BCE, at the Battle of Actium, Antony and Cleopatra's forces are defeated. They flee to Alexandria. As Octavian's legions approach, Antony falls on his sword. Cleopatra, heartbroken yet composed, prepares for the end. She refuses to be paraded in chains through the streets of Rome. She chooses her own fate. In her private chamber, amid the scent of lotus and incense, she presses an asp, the sacred Egyptian cobra, against her skin. The poison takes her swiftly. On August 12th, 30 BCE, Cleopatra dies, just 39 years old. Her son, Caesarion, is captured and killed. Egypt falls into Roman hands. The age of the Pharaohs ends. But Cleopatra's spirit endures. In poetry, in paintings, in the whispered dreams of those who gaze out across the Nile at sunset and remember. She was the last queen of the Nile, the last voice of an ancient world, the final light before the long night. Chapter 14. Roman Egypt, Alexandria under the Caesars, 30 BCE, 395 CE. The year is 30 BCE. The sun rises over Alexandria, but the city feels changed. The banners of Rome now flutter from its towers. The double crown of Egypt, red and white, is placed aside, and in its place, the eagle of Rome watches over the Nile. Egypt has become a province, a jewel in the glittering empire of Augustus, the man who was once Octavian, the conqueror of Cleopatra. Yet, if you walk the streets of Alexandria now, you would still hear the call of merchants selling their wares, still smell the sweet incense drifting from temple doors, still see the pale marble glinting in the afternoon sun. Life continues. Egypt endures. Augustus rules wisely from afar. He knows Egypt is no ordinary prize. Its grain feeds Rome, its temples inspire awe, its traditions stretch back to the dawn of time. And so, Augustus treads carefully. He keeps Egypt under his personal control, placing a Roman governor, the prefect of Egypt, in Alexandria, but allowing many Egyptian customs to continue. The priests still chant to Isis and Osiris. The farmers still mark the seasons by the river's rise and fall. The library, though wounded by past fires, rebuilds its collections. Scholars gather once more. Philosophers debate in the shaded gardens. Mathematicians chart the stars overhead. Physicians study anatomy and herbs, advancing knowledge that will echo into future ages. In these early Roman years, Alexandria shines brighter than ever. It is the second city of the empire, rivaled only by Rome itself. A crossroads of cultures, a meeting place of ideas. Imagine wandering its streets, hearing Greek spoken in one marketplace, Egyptian in the next, passing temples to Egyptian gods standing beside Roman statues of Jupiter, watching ships arrive from Spain, Gaul, India, Nubia, their hulls heavy with gold, glass, ivory, and silk. By night, the lighthouse of Pharaohs still sends its beam across the darkened sea, guiding weary sailors home. Yet change, slow and steady, is in the air. The old religions, the worship of Isis, of Horus, of the sacred river, still hold sway. But Rome brings its own gods, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and soon a new faith quietly takes root. Christianity. At first it is a whisper, small gatherings in shadowed rooms, a fisherman telling a merchant, a mother whispering prayers over her child. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, Christianity spreads like the gentle lapping of the Nile at flood season, unstoppable and quiet. Temples begin to empty. The great festivals draw fewer crowds. In 391 CE, under the decree of the Emperor Theodosius I, the worship of the old gods is officially banned. The temples fall silent, the statues are toppled, the ancient faiths that once bound Egypt together are cast into memory. It is said the great temple of Serapis, the Serapeum of Alexandria, was torn down by a Christian mob, its sacred scrolls and statues lost to time. The river still flows, the city still breathes, but Egypt, now Christian, now Roman to its core, becomes something new. And something old slips quietly into legend. The pharaohs are gone. The gods of the desert and the sky withdraw into stone and sand. The Nile carries away their last prayers. But Alexandria remains, a city of echoes, a city of dreams, a city where, even today, if you listen carefully in the warm evening wind, you might still hear the footsteps of Cleopatra on marble, or the murmured songs of ancient priests drifting from forgotten doorways. Egypt's ancient heart keeps beating, soft and steady, beneath the layers of centuries. Chapter 15. The Final Whispers. The Legacy of Ancient Egypt. The river slows. The sun dips lower along the western horizon. And the story of ancient Egypt, after more than 3,000 years, settles into a golden twilight. Though the pharaohs are gone, though the temples crumble into ruin, Egypt's spirit lingers. It lingers in the way we imagine eternity, in the way we carve memory into stone, in the way we dream of life beyond this world. Long after Cleopatra's final breath, long after the lighthouse falls and the great library fades into dust, travelers from distant lands still come. The Greeks, the Romans, the Arabs, the Europeans. Each finds wonder here, the towering pyramids of Giza, standing against time like guardians of a forgotten age. The enigmatic Sphinx, its battered face gazing eternally eastward toward the rising sun. The temples at Karnak and Luxor, where colossal columns still hold up the sky. The tombs of the Valley of the Kings, hidden deep within the earth, painted with stars and stories for those who journey beyond life. Egypt whispers to all who listen. In 1799, a French soldier digging near Rosetta unearths a black basalt stone, inscribed with ancient words, the Rosetta Stone. Through it, the secrets of the hieroglyphs are unlocked. Voices long silent are heard once more. The songs of river labourers, the prayers of temple priests, the boasts of mighty kings, the love poems of ordinary people. Today, we read their words, we walk their avenues, we stand in awe beneath the colossal statues they raised to the heavens. We feel the pull of that ancient river, still carving its way through the land, still shaping the dreams of a nation. Ancient Egypt is not lost. It flows into us, quietly, steadily, like the Nile at sunset. It teaches us to wonder, to build not only for today, but for eternity, to honor the earth, the stars, and the mysteries in between. As you listen now, imagine the cool night air over the desert, the endless sky, bright with stars, the same stars once watched by farmers, priests, and pharaohs. Imagine standing at the edge of the Nile, feeling the timeless current at your feet. And know that in some small, gentle way, you are part of the river's story. The story of ancient Egypt does not end. It drifts forward, carried on the river of memory, whispered through the winds, etched in the stones, and alive in the dreams of all who close their eyes and drift back across time. Thank you for joining us tonight on Drift Off to History. You have walked the banks of the Nile, stood beneath the ancient stars, and listened to the echoes of a world that still lingers in stone and sand. Now, let your mind drift even deeper. Let the quiet flow of the river carry you into dreams. Breathe softly. Feel the weight of time lifting away. The desert winds grow calm. The stars above Egypt shimmer quietly, watching over your rest. May your dreams tonight be peaceful, your journey through sleep gentle, and your heart filled with wonder for all that came before. Good night, dear traveller. Sleep well, and drift off to history.